In today's video, we delve into the twisted mind of a crazy fan of true crime documentaries and videos like the one you're watching right now. This girl wanted nothing more than to commit the perfect crime and get away with it. This is the story of a psychopath from South Korea. Today, I want to thoroughly examine this case because you're on my channel where I occasionally discuss real crimes and strange phenomena. If you enjoy this, please subscribe and let's get started. Busan, the second largest city in South Korea, is located along the southeastern coast of the country. One of those who called Busan home was 20-year-old Jung Yu-jung. She lived two lives. By day, she was an unremarkable, quiet, and polite girl. By night, she watched crime documentaries, read articles on the topic, and scrolled through similar horrific news stories. You might say, so what? We all do that. But the thing is, her interest turned into an obsession. She was so fanatical about the topic that she eventually began dreaming of trying something herself. She wanted videos and books to be made about her own deeds, and she achieved her goal because right now you are watching video about her. In May of last year, Yoo-Jeong decided to follow her dream and started planning the perfect crime. She borrowed books from the library on how to hide a body and spent 3 months researching forensic technologies and how investigations work. Yoo-Jeong had no criminal past and knew no one outside the law. On paper, she was an ordinary citizen. So, she understood that if her victim was a complete stranger with no ties to her, it would most likely work. And where better to find such a person than in a tutoring app? South Korean youth are under immense pressure to succeed academically. Therefore, tutoring apps have become extremely popular in recent years. These apps are usually full of accredited private tutors advertising their services, making them an ideal hunting ground for Yoo-Jeong. Over several days, she contacted more than 50 tutors in Busan, posing as a mother seeking extra English lessons for her child. After long negotiations, she settled on a female tutor we'll call Kay, a 20-year-old woman who lived alone and accepted students at her apartment. According to those who knew her, Kay was a bright and warm person who genuinely cared about each of her students and wanted them to reach their full potential. She was not only a great listener, but also a compassionate person. So she probably didn't suspect anything when Yoo-Jeong asked, "Do you live alone?" After all, her future student was probably just shy and didn't want anyone else to her and judge her wrong answers. Kay confirmed she did live alone and eventually agreed to meet the student for an introductory lesson in 2 days. Kay's home was in a Gong neighborhood, about a 20-minute drive from where Yoo-Jeong lived with her grandfather, her only guardian and the only relative she knew. On May 26, 2023, around 4 p.m., Yoo-Jeong was captured on surveillance cameras walking to Kay's apartment, dressed in a school uniform she had ordered online. With her small stature and youthful appearance, she could easily pass for the 9th grader Kay had arranged to meet. A few days before, she even cut her hair shorter to look more like a young student. Yoo-Jeong arrived at Kay's apartment at 5:34 p.m., where Kay warmly greeted her, completely unaware of her guest's true intentions. If Kay had any doubts about Yoo-Jeong's age, she had no chance to voice them. Yoo-Jeong immediately entered Kay's apartment and after a quick exchange of pleasantries, said she urgently needed to use the restroom. Kay directed her to the bathroom, but Yoo-Jeong used this opportunity to walk through the apartment, checking if Kay really lived alone. Satisfied that it was safe, Yoo-Jeong took out a kitchen knife she had hidden in her uniform and attacked Kay in the main room, catching her off guard and stabbing her over 100 times, focusing on her neck and chest. The wounds on Kay's palms indicate she tried to defend herself, but ultimately, she couldn't do anything. Even after Kay stopped breathing, Yoo-Jeong continued to inflict brutal blows. An hour after killing Kay, Yoo-Jeong left the apartment, wearing her victim's clothes, which she had taken from her wardrobe, as if assuming her identity. She went to several nearby supermarkets where surveillance cameras captured her buying trash bags, cleaning supplies, and several sharp blades, which she later used to dismember and dispose of Kay's remains. It's unclear why she didn't bring these items with her initially. Perhaps she feared being stopped by an officer and having her bag searched. Or maybe she simply expected Kay to already have these items in her apartment. Or she just didn't know how to plan. Regardless, Yoo-Jeong returned to Kay's apartment and began dismembering her remains. She also pocketed Kay's mobile phone, ID, and wallet. After all this gruesome work, she started cleaning up all evidence of her presence in the apartment. Yoo-Jeong went home to get a suitcase, and surveillance footage shows her cheerfully skipping towards Kay's apartment, ready to continue tidying up. She gathered case clothes into 3 trash bags and threw them into a nearby dump step. She then stuffed the body parts into a suitcase. The entire cleanup process took about 6 hours, during which Yoo-Jeong made 3 trips back and forth between her home and Kay's apartment, gathering evidence and coming and going as if it were her own apartment. Several surveillance videos show her casually walking to and from the crime scene, completely unconcerned about what she had done and what she still needed to do. If you had passed her on the street during one of these moments, you wouldn't have realized what she was planning or what she was capable of. Around midnight on May 27, Yoo-Jeong left Kay's apartment for the last time, carrying a suitcase with Kay's body parts. At the curb, Yoo-Jeong hailed a taxi and asked the driver to take her to Yangsan, 20 kilometers north of Busan. She put the obviously heavy suitcase in the trunk herself, refusing the driver's help, and didn't engage in any conversation during the ride, not even making eye contact with him. When they reached a secluded spot near a river, Yoo-Jeong asked the driver to stop, paid him, took the suitcase out of the trunk herself, and disappeared into the forest without a word. For understandable reasons, the taxi driver found all this strange. He takes the taxi to a river alone in the middle of the night with a suspiciously heavy suitcase. Yoo-Jeong didn't ask him to wait, but instead of leaving, the driver decided to circle the area for a bit to see if she would return to the road. After 15-20 minutes, he saw her coming back through the bushes, still carrying her suitcase. From the way she was carrying it, he could tell it was much lighter than before, as if she had just disposed of something heavy. She flagged him down again and asked for a ride home, where she lived with her grandfather. Authorities believe Yoo-Jeong didn't even realize the taxi driver was the same one who had driven her earlier. The driver complied and tried not to think too much about the strange events. However, later, following his intuition, he contacted the police. It was around 3 a.m. when he reported that a young woman might have discarded something in the deserted forest and provided her home address. Soon, detectives arrived and inspected Yoo-Jeong's suitcase. They asked why it had red stains, to which she replied that she was menstruating at the time and some of the liquid must have gotten into the suitcase. Doubting her words, the police took her to a local hospital. Medical tests confirmed that Yoo-Jeong was not at that stage of her cycle and that the blood in the suitcase was not hers. And this is where we truly delve into Yoo-Jeong's mind. She quickly changed her story, claiming she had just given birth and wanted to get rid of the baby. For some reason, she thought this would sound better and it wouldn't be considered murder. However, she didn't expect the police to conduct an ultrasound, which revealed that this story was yet another lie. By that time, other police officers searching the area had found human remains in the tall grass. Detectives brought Yoo-Jeong in for questioning, but instead of asking for a lawyer, she concocted another story. She claimed she went to Kay's apartment for English lessons, but when she arrived, she found Kay's door unlocked. She entered and, to her horror, found Kay's body on the floor, while the culprit, an imaginary man, was still in the apartment. He locked the door and told her that if she remained silent and helped him dispose of the body, he would let her go. After what could be described as the world's biggest collective facepalm, the detectives composed themselves and politely informed Yoo-Jeong that her story made no sense. Slightly nervous, Yoo-Jeong changed her story again, saying, "It's embarrassing for an adult to look for a tutor, so I pretend to be a schoolgirl." Seeing me, she suspected nothing. Shortly after my arrival, we had a heated argument about her teaching program, and fearing my safety, I killed her in self-defense. At this point, with a sigh of relief, the investigators contacted Yoo-Jeong's grandfather and asked him to come to the station. When he learned what his granddaughter had done, his world collapsed. He had raised her from early childhood and could not believe she could be so cruel to a stranger. But when presented with the evidence, he could no longer deny that Yoo-Jeong was responsible for Kay's death. Since the investigators couldn't get an honest confession from her, they asked the grandfather to enter the room and talk to Yoo-Jeong one-on-one, to which he agreed. Inside, he broke down in tears and begged his granddaughter to tell the truth for his sake. Whether she loved her grandfather or simply understood that this was all over, Yoo-Jeong finally confessed. She explained that there had been no argument. She was simply obsessed with everything related to true crime. Movies, shows, books, new articles. She said she was just curious to know what it felt like to be involved in a case firsthand. She wanted to satisfy that curiosity, so she took the life of someone who had never done her or anyone else any harm. She recounted all all of this so unemotionally and detachedly that it not only took the investigators by surprise, but also stunned even the most experienced among them. After reviewing her search history for a tutor and the surveillance footage from the day of the murder, they were even more astonished. They had encountered cases of premeditated murder before, but nothing like this. They discovered that Yoo-Jeong was particularly fascinated by the film Helpless, a Korean psychological thriller about a woman who kills and then assumes her victim's identity. According to her browser history, Yoo-Jeong watched this film at least once a day. Given how Yoo-Jeong wore case clothes and to her ID, the parallels between the film and her action were clear. But this doesn't mean that movies or any other media are responsible for people's action. It's possible that Yoo-Jeong was simply inspired by Helpless or fell in love with this concept. Looking at her life before this incident, it's clear why the idea of becoming someone else could have been so appealing. Analyzing her messages and social media, the police realized that Yoo-Jeong had no friends, acquaintances, job, or family. Except for her grandfather, she was the most invisible person imaginable. In her school years, she seemed relatively normal with some semblance of a social life. But something changed since then. By chance or misfortune, Yoo-Jeong began living a reclusive, lonely life, interacting with almost no one either in real world or online. Psychologists suggest she wanted to escape this situation both physically and mentally. What could be better than transforming into someone else, someone who leads a fulfilled life, has their own apartment, a job, foreign language skills, friends, someone like Kay. Psychologists say Yoo-Jeong's motive wasn't just curiosity but envy. In her mind, if she was already invisible, disappearing and becoming someone else would be especially easy. During the investigation, authorities contacted each of the 50 tutors Yoo-Jeong had corresponded with, all of whom were young women in their 20s. She had asked each of them if they lived alone and if her daughter could come to their home for lessons. One woman, desperately in need of money, almost accepted Yoo-Jeong as a student but ultimately declined, feeling her apartment was too small for lessons. Now she and all the other tutors live with the chilling thought, it could have been me. Equally disturbing was Yoo-Jeong's complete lack of remorse. After fulfilling her twisted fantasy, surveillance footage taken before and immediately after Kay's death showed her looking eerily calm and composed, walking with almost determined strides. It's hard to understand how Yoo-Jeong could walk out in public looking so collected after having just murdered someone. Of course, after her arrest, she offered rehearsed apologies to the press, saying something like, "I feel sorry for Kay's family and think I just wasn't myself," which didn't sound very sincere. She reserved all her sincerity for her grandfather, who unfortunately was hounded by the media for interviews. During one of these, he blamed himself for Yoo-Jeong's action, stating that it was his fault she turned out the way she did because he had raised her poorly. He also expressed deep sorrow for Kay's family. By all accounts, the grandfather was a kind man who did everything he could to raise Yoo-Jeong alone. His neighbors spoke highly of him, yet now he lives with the guilt of his granddaughter's action. In the run-up to the trial, Yoo-Jeong underwent a PCLR test, which assesses individuals on their ability to empathize, impulsiveness, and whether they lead a parasitic lifestyle. The test includes 20 questions and is scored out of 40 points. In South Korea, anyone scoring above 25 is considered a true psychopath, completely lacking in conscience. Yoo-Jeong scored 28 points. During the trial, Yoo-Jeong asked for leniency, claiming she was suffering from hallucinations at the time of the incident. The prosecutors weren't convinced by yet another defense, stating that she had planned and concealed everything. Therefore, they sought the death penalty, but she managed to avoid this fate. On November 24, 2023, Yoo-Jeong was sentenced to life imprisonment. One can imagine that if the taxi driver hadn't trusted his instincts and called the police, she might have gotten away with it, at least for a while, long enough to prepare for another strike, which she almost certainly would have done. You've probably noticed that throughout the video, I've simply referred to him as the taxi driver because he chose not to reveal his name to the media. He refused interviews and even awards, fearing that Yoo-Jeong might be released early and come after him, or that someone inspired by her might do so. Reports indicate that Yoo-Jeong actually feels quite comfortable in prison. She eats well, sleeps, enjoys the isolation, and shows no signs of remorse. South Korean media often focus on Yoo-Jeong's appearance, emphasizing that no one could have suspected such a young and innocent-looking woman of committing such a heinous act. But as we've often seen on this channel, appearances can be deceiving, and criminals come in all shapes and sizes. I wouldn't say that Yoo-Jeong's appearance particularly surprised me, but the thought did. The thought that in this world, no matter where you are, you don't necessarily necessarily have to look for trouble. Trouble can find you. We can live peacefully, doing all the right things, and then bam, meet our end at the hands of a stranger. One fine day for someone we've never wronged, never met, someone who might smile at us and then just attack us. Yes, just like that. Thank you all for watching.